A vague disclaimer is no one's friend. This podcast will look at episodes in relation to Buffy and Angel as a whole, and therefore contains spoilers for the entirety of both series. If you haven't seen all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel the series, go and watch them before you listen to this. Remember, you've been warned.
The hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
That's why there's us, champions. We live as though the world were as it should be, to show it what it can be.
The Earth is definitely doomed.
It's Tuesday, so it must be time to return to the Hellmouth. We're going through the Buffyverse episode by episode in a look back at Joss Whedon's iconic show. I'm Emcee, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Andie.
And I'm David.
So we are talking about The Harvest, which is the second episode of the series. It originally aired on March 10th, 1997, the same day as Welcome to the Hellmouth. Like the first episode, it was written by Joss Whedon, but this one was directed by John T. Kretschmer, who only directed 2 Buffy episodes, this one and School Hard. So I'm really glad that we're looking at these 2 episodes separately, because looking back, they actually are quite different from each other. The first one is really kind of developing Buffy as a character. There's just so much Buffy stuff. And in this second one, it's really more, we're going to explore what the actual premise of the show is, you know, how the Hellmouth works. They're introducing us to Sunnydale and introducing us to what will eventually be called the Scooby Gang.
Yeah, it did very much feel like sort of a different tone to the episode. I noticed that Buffy didn't really start quipping, her famous quipping, until the end.
Yeah.
Which is something I think was, I mean, there was definitely comedy in the first episode because you have to set that tone up right away. But I noticed that some of her iconic stuff, like the quipping, didn't really come in until that final battle at the end of Harvest.
In Welcome to the Hellmouth, she's really trying to deny who she is. She's trying to deny that she's the Slayer. And I think as part of that, she's trying to hide who she really is. And by hiding who she really is, she makes herself very much, you know, angry and, you know, closed off, which is not the Buffy that we eventually get to know. And in this one, we do get to see more of that, where, you know, she's talking to Xander about decapitating a football player with this little itty bitty knife.
Over these 2 episodes, it's all about that transition. But from the beginning of Welcome to the Hellmouth to the end of the Harvest, it's really her transition from denying everything that has happened to her in recent times and being the Slayer to coming to accept that this is simply who she has to be.
It's also about the formation of the Scoobies, which they're not called Scoobies yet, but it's also sort of this episode that kind of solidifies or starts solidifying those relationships that are going to be essential to the series.
We certainly have things that will go through the entire series. Like, I really think that Xander, his hatred of vampires comes from this whole interaction with Jesse becoming a vampire and him having to stake his own best friend. That's kind of what colors his interactions with Angel and Spike going on. Well, I mean, he's got lots of reasons to dislike them, but I think one of the main reasons is that he hates vampires so much because of what happened to Jesse. Even though Jesse is never mentioned again, it is very much a defining moment for Xander and his characterization. And here we also were introduced to Willow being the computer tech genius, which is something that'll play through her character throughout the entire series. Even when they start to bring in her witch storyline, Willow's still the tech girl.
And the research girl.
And the research girl, yes. And of course, in this, we also get the lore about the Hellmouth, you know, what little there is, because they do kind of they throw a little bit of lore at us, and it's like, now accept it. This is what's going on. But we're not really going to get into it further until season 7.
It's a little hand-wavy at this point.
Yeah.
But it works.
I love they call it Boca del Inferno.
I love that so much.
Because I feel like I ate lunch there last week. So, listeners, I'm from New Mexico, so anything with a vaguely Spanish-sounding name, it sounds like I ate there last week. So, there we go. That was my bad joke. But I also really like how they present the exposition. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is one credit to the writing, because they do throw in an odd joke here and there, but I also think it's like a huge credit to Anthony Stewart Head.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like, I could listen to Tony Head read the phone book, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he sells everything he does.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm jumping ahead. The last scene where the kids are joking around and he says we're doomed. That little bit shouldn't really work. It should kind of fall flat the way it's written.
Yeah.
But he sells it.
Not only does he sell it, but he sells it so well that they call it back all the way in the last episode. They bring it back. That's the one thing that I can really remember all the time from that episode. Them talking about Buffy getting kicked out of school, and it's like the Earth is doomed.
The Earth is doomed, yeah. Like I said, Tony had just such a great job because it doesn't sound lectury and it doesn't actually sound pedantic, which is what we're going to get with the Wesley character later, which is meant to mirror first season Giles. But I think because of Giles's experiences in his youth, he has something else going on. Tony had really put sort of pieces of Giles's character and the way he delivers those expositional lines. And I also noticed that Sarah Michelle Gellar does a great job with the exposition too, and the script in general. A lot of pilots, the exposition is sort of this like, okay, once you get to the third or the fourth episode, you'll be like into it. And this one, you're there immediately and you actually want to know more of the lore, which they never actually give you.
Yeah, I know. I adore the lore, and I really wish we had gotten more of it.
Oh, yeah.
Just talking about characters and personalities, I have this note, and this is no offense to Ken Lerner, because I've seen him in other stuff, but I have a note that says, kind of glad a bunch of hyena kids killed Principal Flutie, because Snyder's got a much better personality.
Oh, I had a note that saying that I really liked Flutie. I thought he was funny.
Yeah, no, I kind of miss him already, to be honest. But they're very different characters, and I think in the long run, Snyder is the better choice.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
I like Flutie. He's a good character. It wouldn't have worked over the length of the series.
Yeah, I mean, part of it might be that I just adore Armin Shimmerman.
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
he's wonderful.
But also, I don't think that you could have kept that I'm your pal, I'm your Principal Bob thing going for too long.
Right.
I think that's really why it was not really working for me. So
I also think that Flutie needs to be set up as this kind of kind, jovial guy. So it is more shocking when he's no longer around all of a sudden.
yeah.
Because that's one of those moments in the series that's pretty defining in terms of, oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
He's not going to be a recurring character? But okay.
Right. It's probably the first instance of not everyone is safe. Which really does distinguish Buffy from most other TV shows. Even ones with a good deal of violence and action and peril. It's like, you always know, oh, the main characters, the ones we're familiar with, they're safe. They're not going to get killed. Oops, wrong.
Of course, Joss wanted to throw that in from the very beginning. He wanted to have Eric Balfour in the opening credits for this episode, but he was not able to do that because, of course, money. They weren't able to make two different versions of the credits, but he wanted to make it so that you didn't know who was going to be around for the entire series, and make that whole idea of, nobody is safe. He does try to do it later on with Tara, which does not work. And then also they do it with Doyle on Angel. Of course, there were a whole bunch of background issues, behind the scenes issues with that. They were able to do it, to an extent, but for these two episodes, he had wanted Eric Balfour to be part of the opening credits, which I don't think people would have been really surprised. Because the way the Jesse character is written, and we talked about this last time, there's not really much to sustain Jesse's character.
No. In fact, I kind of remember, I have a note here. Basically, when Jesse, as vampire, talks about human Jesse and says what a loser he is.
You agree with him?
He's totally right.
Yeah.
The Jesse we see is, there is nothing there. He really is not anything good.
He is weirdly obsessed with Cordelia. Yeah. And that's basically the only thing that I know about him. I don't even know about his relationship with Xander.
Well, what little we see of it, he's kind of jerky to Xander.
Yeah.
He's not a nice person at all. And there's nothing positive about Jesse, really, except that he's Xander's friend.
Yeah.
He has a friend.
We care about him because Xander cares about him.
Which I think is almost a flaw in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's so underwritten, and so I think I probably saw him dying before it happened.
Yeah.
Even way back when I first saw the episode, I was like, okay, he's a red shirt.
Yeah.
Because some stakes have to happen. There has to be he's there to lead the plot, which is he gets captured, Buffy has to fix it. He's kind of a nothing character, yeah. Which... yeah. It's not necessarily Eric Balfour's fault.
Yeah, no, I know he's a wonderful actor. I've seen him in other stuff where he's great. But I do think that Buffy, Part of the problem with the first season is that there was a learning curve to figure out how exactly the show was going to go and what the balance was going to be and how to introduce characters. And I really don't think they hit that stride until the second season. I mean, there are some wonderful episodes in the first season, but it's a little uneven.
It also had no feedback. So these were all shot all at one time, unlike some series where you get 3 or 4 in the can, you put them out, you sort of see what's working, what's not. This was shot like a British television season.
Well, they do it all in one.
You record all of them and then you just put them out into the world.
Yeah. And I don't think they were thinking that Buffy was actually going to come back because, I mean, it was a mid-season replacement and they had all of them done at once. They probably just thought that Buffy was going to be 12 random episodes of this little show about this movie that didn't do too well.
I mean, I'm sure there was an expectation that they hoped it did well.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody ever wants, any of that stuff to, fail. It's really good if it goes somewhere, but I'm not expecting it to. Because, I mean, that is kind of what happens when you get a mid-season replacement that's only 12 episodes. That's kind of like a dumping ground for, okay, so we don't really know what to do with this. But I think the WB was kind of just discovering what it was trying to be. They were really turning into the teen drama. This was the same year that Dawson's Creek came up, wasn't it?
No, I think Dawson's Creek was the next year.
Okay, so it started in season 2?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, WB, I think as a newer independent channel, it was willing to take chances that the major networks probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so it was probably like, well, okay, we can't invest a ton into this, but this might have legs.
Yeah.
So let's try it. And we need to fill this half a season somehow.
Yeah. Okay, and of course this episode also introduces us to a character who's going to stay with us actually longer than characters who were introduced in the first episode. We are introduced to Harmony Kendall, as played by Mercedes McNabb, who is going to stay with Buffy and Angel up until she was in Angel's last episode.
Absolutely.
She is actually, if you count the pilot episode, she is the longest running Buffyverse actor, because David Boreanaz was not in the original pilot of Buffy. He was just brought in to welcome in the Hellmouth. But Harmony was in the original pilot.
Oh, the unaired pilot.
Yeah, there's so much stuff we could say about the unaired pilot.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot.
The main one being, it's like, who is that and what has she done with Willow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Willow is very different in the pilot.
Yeah.
Not just because it's a different actress. I mean,
They wrote her differently.
She has very little to do.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. I mean, there are a number of little differences between the pilot and the open. I mean, first of all, the entire Harvest plot, not existent. Not there. It's all just the Welcome to the Hellmouth stuff. There's no Harvest.
I think we need to differentiate for our listeners that may not quite know. In terms of the pilot was considered to be Welcome to the Hellmouth, but there also was this unaired pilot, which I think was like a 20-minute
presentation, I think
presentation. It was never meant to air.
In the notes that come with this episode, I will include a link to it because, unfortunately for Joss Whedon, it's all up on YouTube.
Joss has basically said it should be burned.
I'll tell him the same thing we said to George Lucas about the Star Wars Holiday Special. The original pilot was not meant for airing. It was just, this is kind of what we're planning to do.
Yeah, it doesn't have Angel, but going back, it does have Harmony.
It does have Harmony. And Jonathan.
And Jonathan,
who we'll get to know later on,
who we all love. I love Danny Strong. He's such a fun, and I guess the trivia is he auditioned for Xander and did not get the role.
Yeah,
that would have been interesting.
That would have been.
What different way to go?
Yeah. I don't think Joss would have wanted to go there because I think that would have been a little too close to actually being Joss.
Yeah, except for the height.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Danny Strong's a hobbit in a good way.
Yeah.
He's a good way.
Yeah, no, but the pilot is really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Because there are, the whole Willow being a lesser character, really.
Yeah.
Although, interestingly, there are a couple of differences in how that's handled. Last week, we mentioned that Buffy seeks Willow out in Welcome to the Hellmouth. In the pilot, Willow approaches Buffy, having said, they said you're new and they've asked me to help you get acclimated.
Yeah.
And also when she gets, she walks off with the vampire to, in this case, the theater set, Willow actually gets fed on.
Oh, really? It's been a long time since I've seen the pilot.
Yes.
But I forgot that bit.
Until I just watched it recently to prepare for this, I did not remember that either. It was kind of shocking, quite frankly, to see that and go, oh, wow, that's interesting.
I see where they were trying to go with the casting because it's not Allison Hannigan. I guess her name is
Riff Regan. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really see what they were trying to do, which was not have this Hollywood homely actress. Because let's face it, Allison Hannigan is absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Allison Hannigan made me realize things about myself, so.
But she's tiny. And Riff Regan is not. She's a larger woman, and I think that was really great. I think what they didn't find, though, was an actress that could deliver.
Yeah.
Yes, I hate to, come down on Riff Regan, but the performance doesn't grab you. I think part of that is, again, that Willow is very underwritten compared to where she would be in the series. But when you see Allison Hannigan in Welcome to the Hellmouth, she jumps out at you.
Yeah.
Immediate, and Riff Regan doesn't.
Riff Regan was missing the vulnerability that they wanted for Willow's character, because they definitely wanted that shy, mousy kind of character.
Yeah, the awkwardness is much more played up in the actual series than in the pilot.
But also she had Allison Hannigan's Willow, had a lot of room to grow.
Yeah.
And she was also a much more experienced actress. Honestly, she'd been doing things since, she was a young kid, much like Sarah Michelle Gellar had been working. So, there's a certain amount of experience, finding your light, things like that also factor into casting decisions.
Yeah. All right, so just back onto the Harvest.
Yes. So, yes, Harmony. We were talking about Harmony.
We talked about Harmony, yeah.
And, Harmony never changed.
Yeah.
And really, she doesn't.
Interesting trivia note. She is the only cast member who was actually in high school when they were filming. She was 16 at the time.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I recognized her from Addams Family.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, that's the girl from Addams Family. I don't think at the time that the episode aired, I had much thoughts about Harmony, but now I have lots of
I am
thoughts
still
about Harmony.
convinced her character from the Addams Family is Harmony.
That's great. I love it. She moved to California and to Sunnydale. So I do we were talking about that, we really like that they have used, I think Joss and the producers recognize a talent or a professionalism in some of these folks and want to use them again and again. I actually have a quote from Danny Strong that said they used Jonathan when they needed something done by a student. They just had Jonathan do it to keep the continuity of the world, which is why I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer stands out as such a landmark show, is because there is a continuity of the worlds.
Well, Joss is incredibly loyal to the people that he likes. I mean, I was just watching Dollhouse, and of course Amy Acker is in that. And when you go on to Avengers and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you see a lot of Buffyverse actors who will show up in whatever roles. I mean, you have characters like Jonathan Woodward, who showed up. He was, when it was just Buffy, Angel, Firefly, they used to call him Joss Whedon's hat trick because he was on all three shows. And there was another actor, I think it was
Carlos Jacot.
Yeah.
Was the other hat trick.
Yeah. And I think those are the two who are the hat tricks. Which, if there is an actor that Joss likes, he's going to reuse them as many times as he can because he was good at recognizing people that are talented and can be useful to, set up the continuity. And I mean, you have a character like Jonathan who does start off, he's an extra. And in the pilot presentation, he's just standing in the line for the bronze. And then he grows into being this fully realized character. And it's the same thing with Harmony. She only shows up so that Cordelia has somebody to bounce dialogue off of. And then she grows into her own character. She ends up becoming a series regular on Angel towards the end of its run and has a complete storyline.
Oh, yeah.
Harmony really is sort of this great through line for the entire Buffyverse. She's just always there. That whole scene with Harmony is just fascinating. First of all, watching Harmony and Cordelia try to write a computer programmer, as a programmer, I'm horrified. It's kind of scary.
That scene really kind of foreshadows some of the dark side of Willow.
Yeah.
It really does. And also, even I knew that's not how computers work.
Yeah.
Right.
Like when she's like, hit deliver. And I'm like, really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, that was just, oh, God. It's, painful.
But it shows Willow growing in herself.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's an early instance of her finding that kind of confidence.
Yeah.
Even though it's malicious here.
Yeah.
But she's standing up for herself and for Buffy, because they're having the whole conversation about Buffy and kind of disparaging Buffy. And she's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna mess with them.
One nitpick that I found that actually, in looking through nitpicks on this episode online, I haven't found anybody mention this. Cordelia makes a mention of how they're going to the Bronze because there's no cover. How come later in the episode the bouncer is counting a lot of money when the vampires are coming up?
I never noticed that.
Maybe he's dealing drugs? Just a thought.
That was the only explanation that I could find for it.
I also want to point out the fake ID business in Sunnydale must be booming.
You would think so.
Because the Bronze serves alcohol.
Yeah.
And everyone there is in high school.
But they're not drinking. It's like an all ages club,
Yeah.
which I've been to. You can be in there if you're 18 or above, but you can't drink. But yeah, these kids are 15. So I think the Bronze works the way, whatever.
The fake ID business has got to be good anyways, because you got like hundreds of vampires that are going to need IDs that say that they're not 100.
True.
Good point.
Very true. I know it's been pointed out online. It's like, what even is the Bronze? They don't have clubs just for kids. And they did.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, here we go. When I was in high school in the early 90s, there were dedicated teen-only clubs.
yeah.
They obviously didn't serve liquor, but you could find me at one at all hours of the day and night, probably. It wasn't as cool as the Bronze, but there was a lot more Cure playing in the background.
What, was Sprung Monkey didn't play at your clubs?
No, it was mostly the Cure and Depeche Mode, but not live.
Yeah, I was going to say, it can't be live.
I wish.
Sprung Monkey did perform again in this episode when Buffy's trying to leave the school grounds. The song Right My Wrong is played, and the band that plays at the Bronze is Dashboard Prophets, who did Wearing Me Down and Ballad for Dead Friends.
I think it's interesting because Cordelia has this line. She's like, I love this song. And I'm like, really? That song, Cordelia? That 90s grunge thing? That just doesn't seem very in character for what Cordelia probably liked. But,
She probably liked it for about 2 minutes.
maybe.
Well, Ballad for Dead Friends, I think, works so well for the scene, where it's used for the scene when the vampires are approaching the Bronze.
In the 90s slow motion
Yes.
walk.
Oh, yes.
It takes me right back to that whole scene. That's like, this defines Buffy in the first season for me.
Mm-hmm.
I really love listening to music from Buffy. I have like an entire Buffy soundtrack. I mean, they did release several soundtracks. They have one of like all of the score, and then they have one of them which I think is just called the Buffy the Vampire Slayer soundtrack, and then another one which is Radio Sunnydale.
Yeah, I have both of those. And I think one was music from about, I would say, seasons 1 through 3.
Sounds about right.
And then the rest is like 4 through 7, because I think the Biff naked stuff from season 4 is on the second soundtrack. No, I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah,
Both soundtracks are actually really good.
Both soundtracks are very lacking. It's what they could get at the time, so I do have my iTunes list where it's as much as I can collect.
Well, Buffy was also one of the first shows where they didn't have music licensing issues.
Yeah.
So if you look at something like the Wonder Years or whatever,
Yeah.
that couldn't be released on DVD because the licensing was only for X amount of time on broadcast.
Yeah.
So I think it was really a smart thing. They used these sort of either up and coming or local bands.
And also, a lot of the time, they were having the bands actually in the episode because there was so much stuff at the Bronze.
Yeah.
Even Roswell, which came, I guess, 2 or 3 seasons after Buffy, they had licensing issues. And that's because the songs were mostly, it wasn't like a band playing, it was just the song playing over, so it was like really easy to replace. Meanwhile, if you have a band at the Bronze, you have a band at the Bronze and they're playing whatever they're playing.
Dawson's Creek notoriously had licensing issues. Paula Cole only gave that I Don't Want to Wait song for a certain amount of time.
Oh, really?
So on any of the re-releases, if you go back and watch Dawson's Creek, it's kind of a guilty pleasure, sue me, whatever. The theme song is totally replaced.
Oh, really?
by a song by the Canadian Jan Arden.
The theme song of Dawson's Creek is about the only thing I still like from Dawson's Creek.
I like Pacey. And we digress.
Dawson's Creek was very much a part of Buffy when it was first airing, because Dawson's Creek aired right after Buffy.
Absolutely.
During seasons, I guess, 2 and 3, because by seasons 4, it was Angel.
Angel, right. Back to back with Angel.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dawson's Creek came on right after Buffy, and I looked it up. It came out the next year.
Okay.
It started in 1998. So I think that was a mid-season replacement also.
If I recall correctly, Buffy it replaced some sort of drama. I think it was called Savannah, which I didn't watch, but I don't recall hearing about it afterwards. So
I think this was the only show I had ever watched on the WB up to that point. Now, actually, no, there was not an official WB. WGN, which is a
subsidiary, yeah.
A subsidiary of WB, were playing the Buffy episodes in my market.
Yeah.
And the actual WB channels didn't launch for a while. So the history of the WB.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who might not even know that the WB was once upon a time a thing, because now it's the CW.
True. And that sort of married two networks together, but I think that Buffy very much laid the foundation of what both the WB and the CW have tried to do with their genre things. I mean, Supernatural is a direct descendant of Buffy.
Actually, I will counter that. Supernatural is a direct descendant of Charmed.
Huh.
I won't get into it here because that's not about Buffy, but Supernatural is a direct descendant of Charmed. It really is. But yeah, no, certainly Buffy was kind of the first supernatural soap opera that the WB had. And they've kept with that for years and years and years, because they do have Supernatural, they have the Vampire Diaries, and they've tried out Roswell, as I mentioned before. These are all shows that kind of have the same idea that Buffy really developed.
Mm-hmm. Not as good. I like some of those shows, but, you know, Buffy is Buffy.
Yeah, Buffy was, it was Buffy. It was lightning in a bottle. And I think even Joss has had trouble establishing shows in the same way that it hit with Buffy.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why he moved on to film at some point. Hopefully he'll come back soon.
I think they also gave him lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
That would do it, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was sick of stuff being canceled.
Yes. Yeah.
So back onto The Harvest.
Oh, The Harvest. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's right. That's what we're talking about.
We've talked about the characters, but we haven't talked as much about the actual plot of the episode, and that is Xander is focused on trying to save Jesse. Meanwhile, Buffy is focused on actually trying to stop the harvest, which is Luke is going to be used as a vessel to collect energy to release the Master. And this is really kind of developing the Master as the main bad guy for this season.
And I love the Master. He gets a bad rap. Not a bad rap, but I think people forget about him. And I love him. He's sly. He's interesting. Mark Metcalf is amazing.
What happens is vampires get taken for granted. By later on in the series, vampires become cannon fodder. They're just what Buffy stakes at the beginning of the episode to set up what's actually going to be happening.
Oh, that's a really good point.
And all of the other vampire bad guys we have end up developing into more of characters outside of being bad guys, because you bring Spike in, and then Spike has his entire storyline, and Angel, of course, has his storyline. Meanwhile, the Master, he only interacts with Buffy the one time. All of his scenes are very separate from everything, but he is the prototype vampire on the show. Well, I guess Darla's really the prototype vampire, since she's the first one who appeared.
Yes, but she's terrible and simpering, and we don't want to talk about her till we get to Angel.
Yeah, but the Master set up what the big bad in the series is supposed to be, and Mark Metcalf does a wonderful job in playing the character. He's so funny, with a character that should really just be terrifying, and we'll talk more about it in other episodes where he, has funny little lines where it's like, oh my god, why is this funny? It's horrific.
Even here in The Harvest, he has the you've got something in your eye bit.
Oh, that's amazing.
Again, at this point, we're very familiar with it. It doesn't quite have the punch it did at the time, but it's a great line.
It reminds me of The Dark Knight, when you have the Joker do his pencil trick, and I see that, and I'm like, Buffy did it first.
Yeah. The line is great because he's like, you failed me. Tell me you're sorry. And he's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, you got something in your eye. It's a brilliant moment.
Yeah, it's set up wonderfully. There are a couple of great lines here that are just great lines just in and of themselves, without the context, that like Luke's "you've been upgraded to bait"
Yeah.
is just a wonderful bit of dialogue. Yeah, the vampires really do get some of the best lines.
I listened to the commentary of both The Hellmouth and Harvest, and Joss talks a little bit about casting Mark Metcalf, and he said that a lot of people came in and read that as a very one-note, mustache-twirling villain, and Mark saw the comedy in it. I trained as an actor for the first half of my life, more than that, and the vampire prosthetics make it really, really hard to talk, and I'm sure his was custom fit, but his diction is on point. Like, he really makes those, he uses the vowels and he uses those plosive sounds, and I think that has to do with, and I looked him up, some of his theater training. Yeah. Same thing with Anthony Stewart had.
Joss actually apologized to Eric Balfour for giving him so many lines with S's in them.
Yeah.
Because the prosthetics were just not working with him actually speaking.
The thing about villains that many people don't get is if you play them as mustache twirling one-note characters, they're really dull. You can play a villain like that, but if you write or play a villain like that, it's going to hurt your story.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly Joss wrote the Master in a way that enabled that humor, that sardonic humor, to come through. And Metcalf obviously saw that and really played, and it really works.
Trivia fact, in the script, it's never mentioned anywhere else, but in the script, the Master's name is Heinrich Joseph Nest.
Yes.
There we go. Their little Buffy trivia.
And he is supposedly 600 years old.
Ooh, didn't know that one. There you go. So going back to the actual plot, because I think I derailed us back to a character, but that's okay. He's an important character.
They're really kind of establishing us that the harvest is going to be the end of the world if it happens. I mean, I don't know if they're exaggerating it, because certainly they have other apocalypses, yes.
There is a joke about that, I think, in one of the later seasons, like...
No, the plural of apocalypse.
Plural of apocalypse.
They have enough of them. They need that word, yes.
I think that's actually... Riley says that.
Yes, you're right. It was Riley.
I would guess it's probably not like the actual apocalypse like we see in later seasons. You look at this episode and then you look at the episode The Wish, where Buffy never comes to Sunnydale. I'm guessing the harvest worked there. Yeah, so it's not so much that the world ends, it's just that Sunnydale gets overrun by vampires.
Right, it's a localized apocalypse.
Yeah.
That amused me.
It is a bit counterintuitive, so yes. But that's essentially what it is. It really isn't an apocalypse, per se. It is a citywide catastrophe.
Yeah.
I don't think the Master has those grand ambitions of a world apocalypse the same way that Angelus does, or Spike and Drew, or Adam, or Glory, any of the other villains. He's just sort of like, I want hot and cold running blood. I'm fine. This is my little world. We're good.
Spike doesn't have apocalyptic ambitions. That's a major plot point in season 2.
It's Drusilla's apocalyptic ambitions that
Spike
goes along with.
The Master just wants to have blood. It is established in The Wish that he's not even about the whole ritual of feeding. He just wants blood and power.
Yeah.
Which, smart guy.
And the Order of Aurelius tends to stay more underground and have rules that we never get into. We talked about this in the last episode. Partially, I'm sure they go underground because of the Master's face.
Yeah.
He can't be out roaming around in non-vamp face.
Yeah.
Which is, he's got fruit punch mouth.
And they do establish later on in Angel that Angelus isn't even a member of the Order of Aurelius because he's considered too much of a wild card for them.
Interesting. I know we were talking about that a lot in the last episode, is the whole mythos is the Order of Aurelius. I've seen Angel less times than I've seen Buffy.
We will be getting to that later on. I have such a soft spot in my heart for Angel.
Oh, I love Angel.
Oh, I like Angel a lot. Angel's great.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that actually, in some ways, I actually like Angel more than I like Buffy, which I can't be killed.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah, also my favorite season of Angel is season 4, so come at me.
Oh, I like that season. The one with Jasmine? Yeah, I like that season.
So you're a resident heretic.
Here's one we'll get to later. I don't hate Riley.
I don't either.
There we
hate
go.
Riley.
Hey, we're
Maybe we'll do an entire episode. We'll just all yell out unpopular opinions all episode and see who can top the other.
The unpopular fan theory special. Yes.
absolutely.
One note that I did write down about this episode was apparently the tricking the vampire with sunrise was something that was originally written for the Buffy movie, but it ended up not being used. So Joss recycled it into this episode with Buffy and Luke, which I really think it kind of defines Buffy in just how inventive she is in what she does.
I think that really becomes one of her defining traits and why I love her so much. She's got this ability to improv, and I think that comes from her lack of training as a Slayer.
Yeah.
Because she's not set in those little boxes.
Yeah.
I could see little nuggets of that coming out in the Buffy movie, because there is that moment in the Buffy movie where I guess it's the flaming cross and she's got like the hairspray and she's like, it's my keen fashion sense, and she ends up emulating the vampire. And I mean, that is kind of reminiscent of this moment and something that will come out in her being really inventive in the way she will take out bad guys.
Like the symbol.
Yeah.
When she throws the symbol, that's just genius.
Which had to be cut out in the UK for being too violent.
Yes.
Right.
I think this episode also shows that Buffy really is a very natural leader.
Yeah.
And that Giles is already starting to acknowledge and listen to that.
We don't really get to see many other Watcher and Slayer relationships up close. I mean, we meet other Watchers and we meet other Slayers, but we don't really see them interacting. But certainly we get a taste of what those relationships are like. Buffy uses Giles as a confidant and a resource rather than somebody to actually tell her what to do.
Right.
Which is a really good way, because if she's going to be putting her life on the line, why shouldn't she be the one calling the shots?
And I think Giles recognizes that pretty quickly. I mean, there's definitely a season 1 frustration that she's not towing the line.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think he very quickly comes to respect her and actually comes to accept that, yes, Xander and Willow are going to be part of this too.
Something that I notice is when he gives the whole sort of Vampire 101 speech after they come back from saving Willow, my immediate thought was, why is he just telling all this to civilians?
Oh, again, I'm going to bring up The Wish. We have the episode The Wish where Buffy never comes to Sunnydale. Giles ends up collecting random people in Sunnydale who have found out about vampires and creates his own little Scooby Gang. So I almost think Giles, as we find out later on, is not really your typical Watcher. He did have like this dark history to him. So I think that he is a bit of an outcast in a way. So he likes to have this little family group.
Yeah, I agree that's true. It's just, it struck me as odd that he was going that route this early.
True.
Again, it's the way the episode runs, it works. You don't really think about it when you first see it because it just happens and you move on. But in retrospect, it was sort of odd. And I'm sort of like, this is probably not in the Watcher manual.
Definitely not.
Buffy's not your typical Slayer. Giles is not your typical Watcher. And that, to a great extent, is why they're so successful as a team.
It says, as we find out more information about that council and how absolutely misogynistic their entire underlying thing is, it really says something about who Giles is as a person.
Yeah.
Yes.
And his respect for, because Slayers aren't really respected by the council. They're tools of the council.
They're weapons.
They're
Absolutely.
weapons. And Giles recognizes in this girl, because she's 15, so I can call her a girl.
Isn't she 16? Oh, no, sorry, 15, yeah.
Or she's just turned 16.
Yeah, she's very young.
Because her birthday's like in December.
It's in January.
January?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's usually right mid-season, which in season 2, she's turning 17.
Capricorn on the cusp of Aquarius.
Well, there you go. She does say that in an episode. But I think it does show really what kind of character, what kind of person Giles is, that he's able to recognize the gifts of not just Buffy, but of Xander to an extent, and of Willow.
Don't know if we really know this, but what is the typical life expectancy of a Slayer once they become the Slayer?
17. The trial that they go through when they turn 17.
That thing, yeah.
18.
That's only done if they live to be that age.
It's meant to weed them out.
Yeah.
I
Right.
really do think it's meant to weed them out. So
yeah.
we can definitely
No.
talk about that when we...
They want to keep them young and they want to keep them malleable.
Right.
Yeah.
My question is, years as Slayer, does Buffy hold the record?
I think it's probably Nikki Wood was the oldest Slayer before Buffy. And I think Buffy, by the end of it, might have outlived Nikki. Nikki was pregnant during her trial.
Right.
So when she was 17 when she was pregnant. And he must have only been about 5 or 6 when she died, based on what he looked like.
There were a series of books. They're not really canonical, but they're interesting, and I have them all, which was Tales of the Slayer.
Right.
And they were short stories, many of them by the Buffy writers, like Jane Espenson, Rebecca Round-Kircher. And they're actually really good. There are really some cool stories in there. Just a little note. So do we want to talk about Xander?
We can talk about Xander.
Because I have things to say about Xander.
All right.
I'm sure, Emcee, that you have things to say about Xander.
I have a note that just says Xander bugs me.
As I watch this again for the millionth time, he doesn't just bug me, he bugs the fuck out of me. I wrote down a couple of lines, and we did talk last time about Xander is the nice guy. His expectations, if he does these things for Buffy, she's gonna let him in her pants, or at least into the smoochies. But there were these,
I also have a problem with some of Xander's toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
Because he has that one line where it's just like, I understand, I'm less than a man.
I'm inadequate, I'm less than a man.
Yeah, because Buffy is taking the lead, because Buffy's taking charge. And it's like, dude, she's like a superpowered, superhuman thing. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a man.
The other line he has in that scene right before that is, she says, well, I'm the Slayer. And he's like, I knew you'd throw that on my face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Xander, how do you know? You've known the girl for something like 2 days?
Yeah.
3 days? And now you throw how you know she's going to react to something? That's just confusing and odd, and presuming that he already knows her when all he's doing is idolizing her.
Hearing a line like that actually makes me think of Xander's upbringing, because we do find out that his family was abusive, both to him and to each other. And I knew you would throw that back in my face is so much a line that a husband and wife in the middle of an intense fight with each other would use.
Well, that is a really excellent point, and one I hadn't really thought about before. And I'm not saying I hate Xander all the time. Sometimes I adore him, and he does have the best lines. And Nikki Brandon's delivery is so funny. And I think he does grow and change as a person. And by the 7th season, he really has figured things out a lot more. But in these first couple of seasons, he goes and follows her when she's told him not to, when Willow's told him not to. She doesn't need the backup. What she does need is someone else in that tunnel for more exposition dump.
Yeah.
So that's one of the purposes he serves. Anyone else thoughts? Because I have a lot to... Xander infuriates me, and especially in the first 2 seasons.
There's a lot of problems with Xander in the first season. The fact that he does fixate on Buffy. We do find out later that he's completely aware of how Willow feels about him, and he just won't acknowledge it. But we will get into that more when we get to the pack. He has this idea of what a man is supposed to be and what a woman is supposed to be. And I think that's part of the reason why Xander does get better later on. In being around Buffy and being around Willow and even being around Cordelia and Anya, he starts to get an idea that, oh no, women are actually people who are all different than each other and can have strengths, and I am not less of a man because they can do things that I can't.
And that can also be seen, I just thought of this, as the influence of Giles in his life.
That's also true, yeah.
Giles has no problem with these women taking charge and being leaders, which is different from what the council thinks. I think Giles really is a good father figure for all of them, but knowing about Xander's family's abusive past, Giles really has to have meant a lot to Xander. Oh, so I did a little bit of research, because it's a word that was used a lot in the 90s, which is the word friend zone.
Yeah.
And that, right, which is what I think that Xander, the whole friend zone concept, which a lot of feminists, including myself, have really debunked. But I read that the word actually first came about on an episode of Friends, which was in 1994. So that's really caught on by the time we hit 1997.
If I remember correctly, it was the one with the blackout.
It's the one with the blackout.
Referring to Ross and Rachel's relationship, which is just a whole big other can of feminist worms for me.
You know, I know that I used the word friend zone in the 90s, talking about someone I was crushing on that didn't like me back. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just in the friend zone. But I don't think I meant it as I'm going to do all these things to them because I feel like I'm entitled to having sex with them. It was just sort of a lamentation of like, well, I guess they don't like me back.
I think also as the word has become more popular, the meaning has mutated so that it is kind of like, if I put in enough friendship quarters, sex will come out eventually.
Which I think was what Xander's doing here.
Yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, infuriating Xander. That's what I had.
And yeah, Xander is very much, he gets aggressive in terms of the whole, Buffy doesn't want to be with me, Buffy would rather be with Angel. Meanwhile, he does completely ignore the fact that Willow has a thing for him. And he just kind of hopes that it will go away eventually. And thankfully, Willow does have enough sense to be like, screw you, I'm gonna go hook up with Seth Green, because Seth Green is fucking adorable.
Right? I don't even think we've talked about Angel yet, either.
We have not talked a lot about, we talked about Angel in Welcome to the Hellmouth, but we haven't talked about him in The Harvest yet. And we do get a little bit more of Angel, and we get a bit more of the Buffy and Angel chemistry, which, I gotta be honest, I never really felt, especially in the first season. It's funny that I should be so fond of Angel as a series, because I didn't really like the character of Angel. I liked Angelus. And actually, when Angelus finally came on the show, I was like, oh my god, David Boreanaz can actually act.
Which he can't in the first season. I'm sorry. He's
wooden as fuck.
Really not good.
Yeah.
And his line delivery is just, yeah, why don't you go fight them? He's like, because I'm afraid?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially here in the early episodes, he's really, it's another of those, yeah, they're not there yet things.
And I'm not sure they really knew what they wanted to do with him, because yes, they did do all of the episodes at the same time, but that doesn't mean that they had them all written at the same time. So right. I think for the first episode, maybe they didn't know he was going to be a vampire. They just knew they wanted a mysterious hunky guy. And so...
Which is interesting, because I mentioned in the last episode that I first watched this episode with my roommates. And when he shows up again, I think all of us were like, I wonder what his deal is. And I'm not sure which one of us said it. We're like, I bet he's a good vampire. We called it. We nailed it. We called that.
I don't think I guessed it. It was just kind of like, okay, what's the deal with this guy? Is he like a prisoner of the vampires, or what? Is he going to be like some sort of vampire hunter? David's performance, he has become quite a good actor. He did really well on Angel, and Bones has just finished up now.
Oh, really? Finally?
Or it's going to be finishing up.
He is pretty bad in these first couple episodes. I think
he'd only been on, like, Married with Children before this. He did, like, a guest appearance as one of Kelly Bundy's boyfriends or something, and that was, like, it.
Yeah, his acting experience was fairly limited at this point.
And it really shows. And I did not really buy the chemistry between him and Buffy. I'm like, okay, I guess he's cute, but other than that, I don't really see what else he's got going for him. He shows up, he says cryptic things, he goes away.
And I did buy into their relationship when I was originally watching, because honestly, I will kind of go with what the writers stick in front of me for the most part in most television. Not to say I don't ship other things in this show, but we can get to that at a later date. So I was buying into it, but also I think at the time of my life, the broody guy with mystery I was all about that. You know, I was 22. I, of course, wanted that. When in actuality, you want Seth Green. You know, you want an Oz in your life.
Was there ever a more perfect guy on Buffy than Oz, other than Giles?
No, he's perfect. He's absolutely perfect. Oz and Giles. And then Tara's the perfect woman, but we'll get to that one later, too.
I think at this point, does anybody have anything that they really want to get in on this episode?
The only thing I had was how so funny Cordelia's line is about, I don't want it because it's more expensive, but because it costs more.
Yes, that is a great line.
It's so Cordy. You know, she's got this whole villain thing going on, but I think by this episode, you're sort of like, am I going to love to hate her? I think I'm going to love to hate her. Because Charisma Carpenter is so winning.
And they couldn't even keep Cordelia as a villainous character or an antagonistic character throughout the entire first season. By the end of it, she's already on their team, because it's like, well, we need to be able to write her more than just, oh, you know, I'm going to say some bad stuff about Buffy and then go away.
Well, that's, again, it's the playing your villains as a one-note character again. that's just dull. So even if Cordelia was going to continue being the sort of antagonistic character that she was introduced as, if they were going to use her as much as they did, they were going to have to give her something more than that.
She is in the opening credits, Charisma Carpenter, so I figure that they did have some kind of...
Yeah. I mean, it was
at least
probably
partly
planned.
fleshed out plan that, but I just wanted to highlight that line because I think it's one of the.
It's
first of all, it gives you major insight in just that one line into exactly who Cordelia is, who her minions are, her harmonies, and Aura doesn't show up in this one, but she does show up frequently, and what that character is going to be like. And just that one line and that one delivery, you really see a very clear picture of who this person is, and I think that's pretty genius.
I wanted to bring up, we talked last episode about how cell phones changed everything in drama, and I think this is where we see the first very minor example of that, where there's I forget who it is now, but Buffy comes back and says, is there any word from somebody? And it was like, oh, well, if you had cell phones you would know that. And one other weird thing about this episode for me that kind of breaks the fourth wall almost for me, during Harmony and Cordelia's conversation in the computer class, and they're talking about Buffy, this guy literally jumps into their conversation. It's like, I mean, he literally jumps into shot. And it's like, what are you doing?
Who are you talking about? Buffy.
Yeah. It's like, huh? You're talking about the new girl?
And he was never seen again.
And never seen again. Just dramatically, it's like, this guy, he's not there. He isn't referenced at all. You don't see him. And literally jumps into shot.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? I would have thought we had drama down better than this by now.
Yeah.
Which also brings up the fact, and I may be the only one that noticed this as someone that works in social services, how do all the students know what happened at Buffy's last school?
Yeah.
Because that would be, I'm not sure what kind of violation it is in the school system, but like, let's call it like a school HIPAA violation, right? You have records. Teachers and principals and are not supposed to tell students about the records of other students. So how the heck does everybody know? Obviously, it's a plot device.
Yeah.
But as someone that works in social services, it really bugged the crap out of me.
My assumption would be just she burned down the gym. That was probably in the news.
Maybe.
That's my guess.
If we look at, I mean, the Buffy movie is not actually canon, but it's canon-ish. It's canon adjacent. And they do, over the closing credits, they do have people being interviewed for television. So, I mean, in this reality in which the gym gets burned down, they would be reporting on the gyms.
Maybe, yeah. I also think it's plot device, even very suspect.
Yeah. So does anybody else have any comments on The Harvest?
I'm going to miss Luke.
Luke was a very good bad guy. Brian Thompson's always good. Brian Thompson does come back again. Of course he does. He's the judge.
He does. But he's not Luke. There's something about Luke's personality that's just very appealing as a villain.
I was actually really upset because they do have a line about him being caught and the Master's like, oh, I can't remember the last time that happened. And Luke's like, I think it was like 1600 Madrid. He caught me sleeping. I was really pissed off that it was too early for it to have been Holtz from Angel because I really would have liked for it to be, but the timing was just completely off. Tear down the face for missed opportunities.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go out and find my Tales of the Slayer books. I think they're in some cupboard somewhere. Because I really do want to take another look at those. Because they were really interesting. I don't think I ever
read any of the Tales from the Slayer books. I did read various Buffy tie-in books that came out during the time of the show, which are ridiculously not canon. But the Tales of the Slayer ones were always a bit more canonical just because they did not have to do with Buffy and the gang.
Right, and they were written by members of the show, members of the writing staff. So I will have to look through my enormous boxes of books.
Okay, so if we're out of things to talk about on The Harvest, other than the fact that I think we all enjoyed The Harvest.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If you like Welcome to the Hellmouth, you'll like The Harvest, because while they are separate episodes, they work as one, so... That's going to be it for this week. Next time, we'll be reviewing The Witch. Until then, grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
We'd like to thank everyone who downloaded our first podcast. We were really happy with how it turned out. You can find us all over the web. We're on both iTunes and Stitcher, and we've also uploaded onto YouTube. Just search for Return to the Hellmouth. You can leave us comments at our website, returntothehellmouth.com, on Tumblr and Facebook at Return to the Hellmouth, or on Twitter at HellmouthReturn. Or you can email us at returntothehellmouth@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read them on the show. See you on Tuesday for The Witch.
Grr, arg.